Hello, good morning, America, and good evening, Slovenia. My name is Ana Maria, and I would like to welcome you all to the fourth webinar of the Entrepreneurship in New Reality project. I hope that you can all hear me well and see me well, as it is time that we start today's webinar. So before we start, I would like to give my thanks to all our guest speakers here today, to our moderator, and of course, I would like to thank you all, to all participants for joining us here. Of course, that you are interested to hear about the topic of promotion of international and of course transatlantic trade. So before we start, just a short introduction for all of you who haven't been with us on the previous webinars. So the ENR project, as we call it shortly, is a series of 10 webinars that are featuring 10 actual topics, all covering this new reality that we are facing right now. We have more than 30 guest speakers, both from the United States and from Slovenia, that are joining us to share their professional know-how, their ideas and perspectives, and of course, to connect the spheres from both sides of the ocean. The Entrepreneurship in New Reality project was created by GEA College, Faculty of Entrepreneurship, who is a modern business center educating entrepreneurs for more than 30 years now, and of course, empowering all individuals with entrepreneurship mindset. This project is implemented in cooperation and with the support of the United States Embassy in Slovenia. And of course, we would like to thank all our international and national partners to making this project a reality. So before we start today's webinar, I hope that all of you who are joining us here today will get new knowledge and new ideas and new motivation so that you can grow both as entrepreneurs and of course as individuals. And now let me introduce our moderator for today. We have here with us Mr. Jure Stojan. Hello, Jure. Jure is a partner.
Hello there.
Hello, Jure is a partner and director of development and research at Institute for Strategic Solution. So he's an expert in all fields in economic research, and he has a vast experience in this field. So Jure, it is a great pleasure to have you here today. Welcome. And of course, this virtual stage is yours.
Well, thank you. The pleasure is all mine. First, I'd like to say a few words, and trust me, it won't be more about our distinguished panelists. It's a great pleasure to have here with us Mr. Carl T. Schulz of World Business Chicago, because he brings a perspective that is potentially very useful to Slovenian business people, but is perhaps slightly well known, and that's the side of the story of small and medium businesses. And to be frank, that's the size bracket Slovenian businesses are mostly at. Our next speaker is Professor Vito Bobek of GEA College, and what he brings to the panel is his vast experience in both academia and consulting, and on top of it, this in an international setting. And we're also excited to have our guest, Peter Wostner of the Institute of Macroeconomic Analysis and Development. Mr. Wostner is not only an expert in trade, but what he can tell us is how this type of data, how this type of information looks from a policy-making perspective. And who knows, perhaps it's not entirely the same perspective shared by everyday businesses. We're happy to learn more. And to start our discussion, let me just make a short observation. We're in February 2021. Is the world this very moment much different than it was, say, in February 2020 or in February 2019? And how does it look from Chicago?
Thank you, Jure. Good afternoon to everyone in Slovenia, and thank you for letting me be part of this conversation today and discussing the trends that we're seeing from Chicago as it relates to trade and the macro trends in our economy. The question of how February 2021 looks versus last year at this time and the year before that is no doubt different and off. I think we've all have personal experiences that we can attest to of how our lives have fundamentally changed in the last year. I think the big perspective that I will start with and happy to share with my other panelists is that by this time last year, Chicago and the United States were still really a month away from feeling the full-blown impact of this global pandemic. I think the date that everyone will point to in the United States was March 11th. So we still had about a month of normal-ish business activity, trade and investment in the world's economy. And in that previous year, though, we have seen a just dramatic change in how we are forced to do business, how we now, no matter what part of the world, if it's Chicago in the United States, if it's Slovenia or somewhere in Asia, we all speak the common language of Zoom. And we've been able to adapt, but undoubtedly our businesses have all slowed and are trying to be agile to this new world economy and this new world order that we're all facing. And happy to share more deeper specifics, but I'll leave it there to start and let Peter or Vito add.
Yep.
And obviously from, oh, sorry. Professor Bobek.
Yeah, I'm afraid I'm losing you, but if I heard correctly, you want me to say a couple of words. Well, actually, I would absolutely agree with Kyle. I would just add a broader perspective. We indeed live in a very disruptive time, and of course, the past cannot be simply extrapolated to the future. So there are huge qualitative and quantitative changes ahead of us. Not only comparing 21 to 20, but also in a broader perspective of the next upcoming 5 to 10 years. So the entire decades. And my assumption is that in the next few years, huge changes will happen regarding the volume and structure of trade, including trade promotion mechanisms, especially regarding new technologies and artificial intelligence that are increasingly becoming key elements for business success. Of course, people still remain essential, but artificial intelligence analysis of large amount of data and technology will act as an assistant in launching an idea on the market. So actually, a huge space is a virtual space for cooperation is opening up. And probably when I addressed huge changes regarding the structure of trade, we probably later on in the discussion, we are going to tackle the issues of resilience and supply chain restructuring. Probably we are going to see downgrading there, but I see a huge potential, in this new technologies, bringing together also completely new business concepts. And this is opening up a space for small companies, SMEs, which are technology based, and so on. Just a sentence on additional explanation. I think we deal with a very unique combination of post-COVID-19 economic recovery, combined with these new technologies, and of course, also a continued and increasing threat of global challenges, such as the rise of China, a US-EU balanced partnership, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a combination of I would say factors that are going to lead to this fundamental changes in the upcoming years.
How does obviously American corporations are the entities one thinks of when hearing the word corporations, but how does the business internalization and the issue of international value chains look from the perspective of a small and medium-sized business from the Midwest, say?
Yeah, I think that perspective, it varies. I think it will vary based on what the industry is. One of the themes that has come up, though, as I've sat with small businesses in any manufacturing, technology services, professional services, is that the international market has somewhat been shaken since President Trump was inaugurated in 2017. The mentality of America first and the combativeness that we've had, not with just adversarial governments, as Vito mentioned, with the rise of China, but with also traditional stable allies that we've done economic cooperation with for years. The combativeness, our media's attention to some of those trade wars has really put into question the need to go at the international market. I think the other challenge here, as you look about it, and this makes somewhat sense when you think about it, I had a business explain this to me once, was that a multinational corporation like a Chevrolet or a General Motors or a Ford Motors, they can easily open up an office, a production facility anywhere in the world because they have teams and teams of people. Whereas a medium-sized company that maybe has 100 folks that work for them in total, well, their leadership team is wearing multiple hats and is trying to be dynamic and balancing production, quality control, payroll, supply chains, and their families. And so it makes it really hard. So when you add those two factors, kind of the time versus the combativeness we hear, I think the international markets have been somewhat slowed down since 2017. But as we look ahead, I think what we're starting to realize as a small business, and I've heard this of late from the trade offices that I have the opportunity to work with, businesses are hurting. The economy is not chugging along as it had been up until March of 2020. And so now more businesses, and I'm speaking really of manufacturing is where I say this, are looking at how they can find other markets where their products and services could find a customer base that would want them, or new global partnerships that could help them open the market. So I think because of COVID, and one of the silver linings here is that we're able to join Zoom calls. We're able to connect with people all over the world in a much more cost-efficient way than previously had been able to be done. We're opening up new markets and exploring new business opportunities that hopefully we will see a positive, quantifiable outcome as the normalization returns and our vaccination rate comes online.
I'm thrilled you mentioned the key opportunity, which is obviously poetry to entrepreneurs' ears. And I was hoping you could share with us the type of opportunities that get explored or have been explored in the past few months, just to
Yeah, I thank you for throwing that question back at me. And Vito, I appreciate you queued this up, so I appreciate you already setting the stage. For the audience who I did not introduce, World Business Chicago is the City of Chicago, Illinois Economic Development Organization. It's our mission to work with local, national, and international companies to help them create job opportunities for Chicagoans like myself. One of the areas that we are proudest of is our strategy when it comes to working with international companies. IBM has ranked Chicago as the #1 North American city for 7 years in a row for foreign direct investment, or helping foreign companies open up an office in the Chicagoland area. And one of the trends that I just want to kind of outline is a lot of folks think that businesses that come over open these huge facilities where they do a lot of manufacturing and big production spaces that are kind of an era from the 1970s and 80s. And what is really more the normal now are smaller offices that are helping bring a technology solution to the United States. And Vito mentioned this, we are living through a still undetermined digital transformation of all industries. I've been in quarantine. Why it looks like I have a nice office behind me, it's actually my nasty kitchen that my toddler consistently ruins. I've been here for 11 months now. I haven't been in a restaurant. My whole interaction with my local restaurant community are through online restaurant delivery service, restaurant technology. Manufacturers who are so cautious of keeping their people safe are investing heavily in automation, in digital and artificial intelligence and IoT solutions that can minimize how many people they need to have on a plant floor. I knew one manufacturer who had bought a $750,000, $750,000 piece of equipment that would allow him to spread out his workforce from 10 people at one time to 2 people, and allowed them to stay open, avoid any liabilities with the COVID crisis, and be much more productive. And so I share that because where we see the opportunity moving forward is with European technologies that provide automation and robotics and the transformation to a more digital economy really playing well, especially with these small and medium-sized enterprises that make up the backbone of my economy, because they want to stay competitive. China is a competitor. Taiwan, Thailand, Brazil, India, Mexico have all benefited from COVID as they become low-cost opportunities. And so for manufacturers or healthcare in the United States to remain competitive, they need to find solutions that help them be just as productive, have just the same level of quality, but minimize their cost. And so one of the outcomes that I think America needs to start talking about is what will happen to the job as we move forward. That's a different conversation for a different webinar, but the digital transformation and the expertise of European technologies is something that, from personal experiences, American companies and Chicago companies are interested in exploring and considering for their operation.
If we now turn from the American opportunities to opportunities present in Slovenia's entrepreneurs, in Slovenian industry, what are the trends? Which are the industries that are set to benefit from the changes? Mr. Wostner.
Yeah, hi everybody. Thanks for the invitation, and just call me for my first name, as we agreed.
Yes.
Just a couple of comments first. First, I'm glad that the way how we approach this discussion on Slovenia US is on the regional level, because there is no US. There are cities and regions. That's the right level, and especially, you know, Carl's representation of that he's primarily connected with SMEs is even more important. you know, the majority of the initiatives was focusing on the giants, and you know, where even the government itself was a bit small. That's number one. Two, I think there is really, you know, if there is something that we can gain from at these times from the US that we really would benefit, and that's already going in the direction of collaboration, is, you know, it's these dynamism and entrepreneurial spirit and speed, I would say. You know, that's something that I think we need to kind of I talk about. We need to kind of you know, put the gear up in our gearbox. We're simply, you know, there are a number of things that are going the right direction, but today the right direction isn't good enough. You know, you have to be faster, and and it seems to me that that's something that, exactly because of the new technologies and the complete globalization and the communication channels allow for SMEs to cooperate. And I think that's opening up new opportunities for cooperation exactly on the regional level as this discussion today is structured. Third point, Jure, you started the discussion, you know, comparing February to 21 to 20. Indeed, I mean, I think COVID, you know, a lot of things different, but you know, what was going on to the global value chains and reordering, that is not new, and that is not related to COVID. It would have happened anyway. Everything that was mentioned today, from, you know, reversal of fragmentation of global value chains, the rising uncertainty, the trade disputes, everything, even the resilience discussion was not started by COVID. That's something that was going on, you know, years before that. For example, OECD was talking about seismic shifts in reorganization of global value chains in 2017, for example. So that's something that, of course, you know, what COVID did was it really kind of boosted the attention and perceptiveness of all of us, because we all have to be on Zoom now. In professional circles, I would say, you know, that was present anyway, and every serious businessman knew already that, you know, it's now our serious times, and every serious government actually took that into account as well to adapt their policies. So to me, you know, if I would sum up, what will the, you know, where the future success will lie, you know, it will be with those that will transform the fastest, that will invest in knowledge, and that will be heavily globally internationally integrated. Now, from Slovenian perspective, I mean, for us, this is, you know, for Kyle, you know, and for his SMEs, that's not a necessity by itself. You know, we're so small. For us, everybody that is successful and dynamic is already international, almost, except for those, you know, for those specifics. So for us, that is, it's more about what is our role and position in those global value chains. And that's something that indeed the digital transformation, rather, that Vito was referring to, that's the name of the game today. So on, you know, and there are interesting, you know, there are things that, you know, I could now kind of go around, and things that are going on in Slovenia. Kyle, for your information, and for every other possible participant who is with us, you know, Slovenia is one of the most diversified economies of the OECD. So in spite of our small size, we do a lot of stuff. And within that, so, you know, I could talk, you know, the traditional approach to this discussion is, you know, we do automotive, we do pharmaceuticals, we're strong in materials, rubber, paper, blah, blah. But I don't think that really is the interesting part, because within that, there's, of course, our players are niche players, but there are stuff which, you know, on this much more granular level, that I think the opportunities can really be found. Now, for that, one needs to be organized, and Slovenia has promoted the smart specialization approach since 2016, where we have tried together with the industry to identify which are those areas where we have a competitive edge. Now, one of those, for example, just to mention, and then I'll finish, and I don't want to, so it's perhaps just a ground for discussion later on. I can even show a picture. But one of the stuff, for example, when one looks at the data, is, you mentioned, Kyle, you know, restaurants and these kind of businesses. It turns out that, for example, in Slovenia, we're very strong in tool making, as one of the examples, but one of the sectors which so one of the specializations of this tool-making industry is, interestingly, in food processing industries. For example, in, you know, so equipment to do ice creams, equipment for bakeries and stuff like that. So this is the kind of stuff where we will really have the potential, where we can do very, high innovative stuff, which is different, very efficient. We have a long engineering tradition, and this, I think, if we propel it, to the next level in sense of promoting international integration, if we promote it by, even investing more heavily in design, adjusting with, that companies will be agile, managed in agile fashion, then, we have something to work on. So to me, I think it's this repositioning of our companies within the global value chains that's really where I see the opportunities. If we can take it, I think, it will be great. If not, well, perhaps for the next discussion.
Vito?
Thank you very much. Yeah, I would agree with that. What Peter said, because we all know that cross-border trade has ballooned in the past several decades, and so too has the expansion of global supply networks, and this created a false impression that this is a self-perpetuating eternal process that is going just to continue. And basically, I would agree with Peter that the shift was already well underway prior to the coronavirus outbreak. The virus has simply reinforced the change, but the trend was driven by nationalism in some countries such as the US, Japan, Turkey, parts of Europe, which was a response to falling income, increasing unemployment, and inequality following the 2008 financial meltdown. So we can see the seeds of the change even, in previous economic crisis. I believe that the global trade will lead to supply chains becoming more localized. Trying to produce and ship locally will ensure less disruption in case of limited movement of people and goods. And I have seen just a couple of days ago a survey by McKinsey, the consultancy, that found that supply chain executives plan to focus on resilience, with 40% of 60 respondents actively looking for nearshoring solutions. And the big beneficiaries are countries like Turkey and Mexico. Turkey in case of Europe, and Mexico in case of the US. So basically, yes, we are discussing the trends which are not new, but they are being reinforced with the outbreak of COVID and all this, global trade issues.
Before we go slightly deeper into contemporary trends, we got two excellent questions from our audiences, and I would suggest we try and answer them first before moving to the trends, because they're really topical. So the first one is for Kyle, and it's a question regarding the fluidity about know-how in the United States. I wanted member wanted you to comment on the American flexibility in terms of intellectual property, whether this has changed.
As a caveat to that question, are we talking about how we're moving about, how people are moving about, and how the working from home has affected the ability for new IP, and that we're no longer contained to cities?
Well, if I may elaborate on the question, just from the perspective I would personally like to hear, it's the question of preparedness, say, to buy Slovenian.
Got it. I think it's opened up. I think it's opened up more. As I said before, the ability to bring together audiences all over the world to do Zoom calls has dropped the barriers to traditional trade efforts. It has saved budgets. I think in the past, Americans are very narrow-minded when it comes to how they view the world. There's the phrase American exceptionalism, and then kind of the history of America as it's woven in there. So we know of the UK because of our affiliation with the Revolutionary War. We know Germany from the World Wars and Japan. And then the rest of our geographical understanding is they're probably second graders in Europe who have better knowledge of where countries are than we do as Americans. And so when we think about that kind of understanding in terms of trade, we're going to naturally default to going to England or to Germany or to China, Japan. Just we have that sense of, oh, we have some familiarity with there. And when resources are precious and doing a trade mission and the airfare, shipping the products, doing the booth, you want to be as precious as possible. So you go where it's safe. Zoom has changed that whole nature. It's a 60-minute, you can hop on and get a sense of what the IP would be, what the technologies are that are happening in that market, and kind of just do a quick walkthrough, kind of window shop, if you will, before you actually have to commit to buying. So I think because of Zoom, we have opened up the world to IP. The one challenge that we're starting to run into is the Zoom fatigue and trying to make these conversations that we sit in front of our computer relevant and engaging and compelling. And as we've continued to try to promote connections with other international partners, it's getting harder because I think people are tired of kind of looking at a screen and not being able to connect. But that's a future outcome. I think right now, though, because of the pandemic, one of the silver linings is it's easier to find new technologies, build out new partnerships, and really assess what that could do for your operation and making you more competitive. Especially, as Vito said, the resiliency of the supply chain and the reshoring. I think when President Trump came into office, everyone thought there'd be this boom back into American manufacturing, but what's happening is it's going to Mexico because Mexico is still cheaper comparatively. And so for us to compete with Mexico, with Turkey, with Taiwan and China still, the IP that's being developed is crucial. And I know that's an area that our industries are looking for and is what's the most compelling when we invite our small businesses to participate in a virtual program.
And the second question refers to the shipping costs, and I think we can safely broaden it to costs, which because of the pandemic have increased. And so the question is, these temporary disruptions can keep the shipping costs elevated for long enough to basically drive some players out of the businesses. When do you project the current levels of disruptions to logistics to persist?
May I say a couple of words on that? Yeah, all right. So basically, we are talking about reinforcement of these trends regarding supply chain reorganization, and of course, globalization is a little bit, slowed down, at least temporarily. And we could say that companies today are prioritizing resilience over efficiency as they look to curb costs to weather the disruption from the pandemic. And basically, what we need to mention here is also the interplay of regulators in this game, because regulators help companies to create global networks that reduce the risks of exclusively sourcing from specific countries or regions. For example, let me mention the case of Japan. The regulators there are providing incentives in the form of subsidies worth $2.2 billion to help its manufacturers move production out of China and back to Japan, or other countries in Asia like Indonesia or the Philippines. And also, if you take a look to the recovery and resilience program of the European Union, you would also see how the focus on reorganization of supply chains, and I've heard that at least 20% of the EU companies are rethinking of bringing the supply chains closer to Europe, which is in line with that trend which I mentioned already before. So I would argue that in times of crisis, the procurement becomes finance's eyes and ears, offering visibility and control on spend, insight into supplier risk, as well as helping make the decisions that will stand up during a recovery. So companies are basically moving from a just-in-time to just-in-case supply chains, and they prefer quickly sourcing new suppliers in new categories with confidence, making decisions with complex restrictions at speed, and of course working with suppliers at scale. So there are significant shifts in this area visible already.
But what happens with sorry, please, Peter.
Yeah, just an observation. When I was listening to this, it's Chicago area in US we're talking about, and if anything, they should remind us of is that we should not be thinking products only. It's the services and integration of services. Trade in services will be increasingly, that will kind of get an additional boost because of the, all the things, let's not get into it why, but that will be. So to me, for example, the opportunities on the services side, I mentioned engineering before, there are solutions provider or vice versa, if you look at there are American companies which are opening up subsidiaries here just to get talent. That's not necessarily to the best of our interest necessarily, but but it can be if we kind of capitalize on exactly in building on trading services. So and that's something that I'm observing. In Slovenia, we are still kind of focused on this 20th century world. It's about producing something in terms of products, and that's the wrong perspective. Not that it's not important. For a country like Slovenia, I think it will remain important, but it will be increasingly its importance will increasingly lie in the connection between production and other services that will be provided up or downstream. So to me, once you start thinking in that direction, then I think we put our finger to the real kind of hidden treasure of possible cooperation.
And Peter, you mentioned this a moment ago during your last remarks about the knowledge economy that we're in, and how innovation is key. And that's been, I think, probably the theme that I've blabbered on about more than anything else is innovation and the digital transformation. That's an opportunity that is underspoken when we talk about kind of transatlantic trade are in those services. And for Chicago, we're in the middle section of the United States. We have long been the crossroads of where the Eastern New York City has met the Western San Francisco, Silicon Valley, Los Angeles, and have been that hub for everything. And one of the areas that we're proudest of is, while everyone knows innovation and technology in the United States and San Francisco because of Facebook and Twitter and all those social media apps that we can't get off the phone with, Chicago actually leads the nation and beats business to business technology innovations and solutions when it comes to return on investment for venture capitalists and private equity companies. we are the #1 city in terms of developing those services that are going to help transform our economies and drive us forward. And one of the trends we're hearing about, and this actually just came up, Poland talked about Chicago companies that are opening offices in Poland because they want access to the innovative talent and mind power that the Polish economy is producing. And so, Peter, I just wanted to add that because I think your point is right on the money when we look at the 21st century that we're in and what will come out of this pandemic.
If I may add a couple of words on that. Thank you, Peter and Kyle, for raising this issue. I absolutely agree. My first assumption was, or my first recommendation at the beginning and during my first intervention was that we should not extrapolate when we forecast. We shouldn't be focused on this 20 centuries, as you Peter said, 20 centuries, products, etc. If we just take into account the major trends in the business environment, which are they? It's the emergence of a new type of business ecosystem, with very distinct character from traditional vertically integrated firms. So every organization in the ecosystem has to be aware of the bigger picture. Innovation in ecosystems require collective action, etc. Another trend in the business environment is the so-called universal connector, or mechanisms through which business can be conducted anonymously at huge scale, and the emergence of the so-called elastic enterprise, and then business platforms and cloud infrastructures. So all these trends in the business environments globally, they open up space for cooperation in services sector of especially of small and medium-sized companies. As it was mentioned before, huge multinational companies, they have their own channels. They can enter also in this traditional classical doing of business. They can enter any location in the world. But all these new trends in business environment, they open up a space for small and medium-sized enterprises, especially those which are technology-based and innovative per se. And also, there was one previous question from the audience, the role of the know-how. So in this ecosystems, also the role of the know-how is completely different as it used to be, in the past decades.
I'm glad to report new questions from the audience, which are really stepping up the games in terms of discussion. So the first question refers to the business model of Slovenia. And it's the question whether we weren't paying enough attention to business models, and if we're merely trying to reinvent existing models. So perhaps Peter, please.
Yeah, hi, Andro. We know each other. We've discussed this issue many times. Absolutely. I mean, at the institute I work for, we have just produced, well, just in November, we launched the productivity report. And one of the things we highlighted in particular was the transition to new business models, the servitization. It's something that, it's not just that companies are not paying enough attention. It's also, it's not being promoted enough by the government. We are still perceiving digitalization as a process of informatization, which are two different things. We are very good in informatization, but digital transformation, which is something that is about new business models, is something we kind of tend to forget. We tend to forget about. We tend to think about efficiency, and we forget about designing or providing services and products, the value creation for the customer. It's a, it's a phrase that it's a standard phrase, but not all used that much around here. So yeah, I think that is something that we should definitely kind of jump full-headed immediately. I'm rather critical about the government's response in that regard. I think COVID could be used to a much greater extent to do exactly that, to promote digital transformation. It is going on, but it's the data that we have. Kyle was very optimistic about it. Every survey available coming from the US and everywhere else is showing to huge acceleration. Bain, for example, for the US, like 84% of companies kind of accelerating. In our case, it is acceleration, but it's acceleration of basic kind of informatization. We are, it's a mixed data, but it doesn't, I'm not too optimistic about it. I think if there is a role for the governments to kind of push this process much more aggressively, much faster. I think, that's to me, frankly, that is the only way forward. And that links up exactly to the discussion that we have today. This is a precondition, especially for SMEs. For large companies, especially those which are part of the multinationals, of course, it still matters, but it's less relevant. For SMEs, it's crucial. It's a matter of to what extent they're actually able to dive into it. It's still a homework that I think Slovenia needs to do.
There's another connected question for the audience, from the audience, which is directed to Kyle, and I'll paraphrase a little bit. So obviously, Chicago is a world-class business destination, and you're representing an agency or an institution with a fixed mandate. But just in a nutshell, what are the areas where the local infrastructure in Chicago can not only so in general the environment, the know-how, the openness, all the various aspects we've touched already, which are transferable even to countries as Slovenia?
That is I think that is okay, that's a good question. I was wondering if I will get stumped on that. Thinking about kind of trade, how we grow our economy, what makes Chicago, and I appreciate the compliment that we are a world-class destination for businesses. We'd love to hear that. That will make our mayor very proud to know. I think the key areas that we see as the advantages for Chicago that companies of all sizes tell us that make Chicago a great place to do business that are transferable, it's the education. It's the institutions of higher learning that will help maintain a competitive nature. And I think I say higher learning because I think so often, and I am a product of a generation that was taught to go to a 4-year school, and that would put you on a path to an American middle class dream, and not so much go to get an education that can make you a productive citizen for this economy. And so we've got a generation that I'm part of that's strappled with crippling student loan debt that is kind of denying them the true access to the middle class that our parents and grandparents before us knew, where really we need to have those universities produce education that's relevant for the industry. So apprenticeship models that we're basically, Americans are ripping off Europeans' apprenticeship models and acting like we came up with them on our own. And then relevant contemporary degrees that are relevant. I think so often we think my degree is in political science. I don't do a whole lot of political anything in my day-to-day job, but I have that degree. So relevant degrees, I think that's the transferable part here that allows economies to stand out. It allows them to be competitive and attract further investment. And from Peter's point, it seems like that's an opportunity that Slovenia is already taking advantage of with some of this inbound investment that's scooping up the education. But the universities, to me, seem to be the one strength that Chicago has that would be transferable, and the promotion of them as a resource and partner for small businesses and medium enterprises to do trade, and to help these our viewers today, go to them. I've used our university trade centers to help our small businesses develop out their export plan. So that's, I think, the best answer I can provide.
If we move to the final rounding up bit of our conversation, or rather just before we do the winding up and summarizing our key messages for today, or rather for tonight, my last question would refer to not only the general trends we've been discussing, but also to the unmentioned elephant in the room so far, which is the realignment of geopolitical reality we're living through, and how important is it for Slovenian company that's trying to explore the American market to avoid any Chinese intellectual property, any potential components that are China-made, etc. Is it something for Slovenian business people to worry about? Perhaps Kyle. Oh yes, Kyle.
I'm happy to take a stab at that. I had a conversation with Innovation Hub in the Netherlands this morning, and a conversation with an Israeli innovation center yesterday. And the key question that keeps coming up is, what is the American approach to the global stage now that President Biden has been in office for all of 2 weeks? And my response has been, he's been in all of office for 2 weeks, so still to be determined. I think one of the things that's interesting in the trend is that it looks like America will be going back to a normal sense of how we interact, that we want to be at the forefront of international relationships. We want to help promote our allies and advance the cause of capitalism and liberalization, democracy around the world. However, I think we're still kind of seeing some of the remnants of the Trump foreign policy with Biden's remarks, especially about getting tougher and keeping some of the policies in regards to China. But I would imagine you would see the Americans return to the international stage in a place that we have long been for the better part of the 20th century and the first part of the 21st century, is leaders, allies, and advocates for strong trade, working relationships that would benefit all. The globalization may disrupt existing industries and economies, but over the long run grows economies and creates jobs and peace for everyone. So still to be determined kind of what will look like. And, you know, we've got a cabinet to continue to nominate. We've got an impeachment trial starting here in 30 minutes again. So we got some other things to get to. Oh, COVID and our economy, but that would be my early guess.
Yes.
Can I,
dear panelists, yes. Yes, please. We just have enough time, Peter, please. Sorry.
Yeah, okay. No, I just wanted to use the, I think we forget something. We're so small. No one really cares about, whether we go one or the in one direction or the other. I think, kind of Biden will need to keep some of the Trump elements because but that will not impact the level of cooperation if there is will between SMEs on both sides, between Chicago and Slovenia. I think this is it's sometimes we care about all this micro stuff, which is important if you are China, then it matters. But for us, it doesn't. We are good enough. No one knows, as Kyle nicely, politely said, no Americans don't know anyways. And that's a good thing, So to me, I would say, there is, when I said we are one of the most diversified economy, it means we can cooperate on anything. That's the point. Wherever we went, when I was still a policymaker, when we went to Bavaria, when we went to Lombardy, when we, we do every kinds of stuff. So the question is, where is will to engage? For example, we produce like this crazy stuff. For example, we have a kind of a floating electrical thing that floats on the water. Quadrofoil is called. That's something that Americans might like, for example. If there is will, it's a small company with currently 20, 30 employees. It's great. So to me, creativity, we have this element of engineering tradition, but an element of craziness and creativity. So that's something that I would say, let's unleash ourselves again, because that's something that Americans would appreciate. Now, if we add the flavor that this is one of the nicest parts in the world, well, then we might have a good starting point that we actually do something with cooperation. So Kyle, that would be my final pitch for this country. Thanks.
You sold me with the crazy part, the crazy and creative. I think that's I probably appeal to the craziness more than others, but I like that. That could be the
Actually, it's already time for the recap, and Peter has given us some really welcome dose of optimism and realism, mind you. What I'd like to ask Vito in the as a recap, in summary, because our discussion has really focused on both the trends and the underlying changes the world economy is going through, which present new opportunities for Slovenia. But what will be in terms of keywords? What will be the three most important keywords or takeaways? So one would be definitely we said a relocalization of gains and pre-existing and an acceleration of pre-existing trends. What am I missing?
Well, actually, if I should summarize somehow and squeeze the entire discussion into three keywords, which is almost mission impossible, I would definitely say disruption, technology, yeah, innovativeness, new business models, and of course, a favorable framework for mutual cooperation, yeah, which is of course not done on the Slovenia-US level, but EU-US level, because we, of course, we follow the common commercial policy in the EU, and I think that there are huge opportunities out there, also huge challenges, coming with these opportunities like cybersecurity, data privacy, 5G, artificial intelligence, environmental issues, and all these challenges will require to shape a global trading system in which services, especially digital ones, as it was, mentioned before, would increasingly supplement flows of manufactured goods.
Thank you very much. Actually, it's a wonderful recap you've given us. I think we're grateful for the keywords, and just to summarize our discussion, still we're optimists, which I think it's a good way to finish this discussion.
I thought for sure that the data would make me more of a cynic, and I think maybe realist, but still an optimist. And so thank you, Vito and Peter, for being part of the panel, Jure, for inviting me to share our perspective and kind of realize that we're still all in this together, that we are very much a interlinked world where we all have the kind of the same questions and curiosities. So thank you all.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
It was a privilege to be here. Thank you.
Thank you also on our behalf. It was really a great panel. So thank you so much for joining us from the United States, Kyle, and thank you, Vito, and thank you, Peter, of course, to share the Slovenian perspective. And of course, thank you, Jure, for leading this panel. And of course, thanks to everybody. Thanks to everybody who was listening us today. I hope you learned some great insights so that you can start or expand also transatlantic connection. And of course, trade in the future, let's keep our fingers crossed this would be possible. So thank you all, and we will see each other next week for the panel Women in STEAM. So it's going to be a little different topic, and of course we are eager to see you again. So next Tuesday, same time, same place. And of course, you have my email, so feel free to share back any feedback so that we know how the experience was on your side. So thank you again, and good night, Slovenia, and goodbye, America. Bye-bye.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye. Ciao.
Bye-bye.